Beginning in 2026, as far as the UFC is concerned, pay-per-view is dead. You'll recall at the very beginning of the year, we had our prediction show. And my vote, and I'm not trying to say that I was right, but my vote for what was going to be the biggest story of the year in 2025, as far as the UFC was concerned, was their rights deal. It was coming to an end here in the United States, only in the United States. It was coming to an end with ESPN at the end of 2025. They signed a deal back in 2018 with ESPN. Initially, it was a deal that was going to start in 2019. It was going to be a 4-year deal. In the early portion of that deal, they extended it for 2 extra years, which included the exclusive pay-per-views on ESPN Plus. You know the drill by now. And let it be known that it was once New York Rick and I on New Year's Eve 2018 who ushered in the ESPN era on ESPN2. We were the ones that brought it to you at the stroke of midnight. What a time that was. Perhaps we'll unearth that clip when this is all said and done. But essentially, it was a 6-year deal that started on January 1st, 2019 and going to end December 31st, 2025. And so we were all wondering, where were they going to go? Were they going to re-up with ESPN? Were they going to sign with the likes of Netflix? Was there going to be an Amazon involved, an Apple involved, a Warner Brothers Discovery involved? Who was going to get the UFC deal? And oh, by the way, I think one of the biggest questions, and dare I say, one of the great predictions that everyone, including myself, had was, look at the sign of the times, look at the NFL, look at the NBA, look at Major League Baseball, look at every major sports entity. They all split up their TV packages at this point, especially here in the United States. And so the big prediction was, for the first time ever, the UFC would split up their TV package. Remember, back in the day, 2005 to 2011, they were on Spike TV, and they were just on Spike TV. And yes, they had a little cup of coffee with Versus, but that's because they took over the WEC deal. Then 2012 to 2019, they were on Fox and the other, Fox family of networks, but it was a Fox deal, Fuel TV, FS1, etc. 2019 to 2025, ESPN. The big prediction was, all right, how are they going to split this up? Are they going to go 30 shows on ESPN and 13 on Netflix? Are they going to go, 39 on ESPN and 4 big ones on Netflix? Are they going to do more shows? Are they going to do less shows? What's it going to be? My friends, this morning we found out the answer to that question. It was announced officially this morning that beginning 2026, the UFC is taking its entire package, the whole thing, over to Paramount. Out of nowhere, here comes Paramount, and Paramount Plus to be exact, and CBS as well. Yes, the Tiffany Network. No one saw this coming. And so as of 2026, ESPN is out of the UFC business. Now, they are still in the PFL business. They have 1 year left on that deal. That deal expires at the end of 2026. Are they going to want to stay in the MMA business and be involved with the distant number 2? That remains to be seen. We found out last week, around 5 or so days ago, that they were signing a deal with WWE, which of course is under the TKO umbrella, beginning 2026, to be the home of their 10 PLEs over 12 nights. SummerSlam 2 nights, WrestleMania 2 nights. That deal was for $1.1 billion over the course of 5 years, which equals out to approximately $325 million a year. Most people, including myself, thought, all right, this is a sign that a bigger deal is to come. They're involved in the TKO business. WWE coming over to ESPN, who saw that coming? But surely that's a sign that the UFC is coming back as well. And maybe even Zuffa Boxing, that's still out there too. But then something happened on Friday. Actually, it was on Thursday. Something happened on Thursday. On Thursday, the Skydance Paramount merger was officially announced. Skydance, led by David Ellison, son of Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle. They're doing it all. Big, multi-billion dollars involved, taking over the whole Paramount kit and caboodle, everything under the sun. That gets announced on Thursday. He does an interview on Friday talking about we need content. And in his first big deal since that announcement, on Monday today, they announced that they have acquired the rights domestically here in the United States to the whole UFC package beginning in 2026. What does that all mean? That means that all 43 events, and they've quoted 43, that's 30 fight nights and 13 pay-per-views. I put air quotes because they're no longer pay-per-views. Hold that thought. Premium live events, 43 total, will be moving from the ESPN family of networks to Paramount, Paramount Plus, and CBS. The plan is every single one of those 43 events will be on Paramount Plus. It appears as though, based on the comments from Mark Shapiro, the president and COO of TKO, and Ari Emanuel this morning on CNBC, that the vast majority, if not all, they sort of hedged a little bit, but if not all, of the numbered events, that's 13, so your 331, your 332, etc., will be on Paramount Plus and CBS. That means beginning in 2026, as far as the UFC is concerned, pay-per-view is dead. For the first time in the UFC's history, they will no longer be in the pay-per-view business. The pay-per-view model is finished. You will not have to pay $79.99, $80, $60, $50 for the number of events. Finally, MMA fans are being treated like NBA fans, NFL fans, MLB fans, NHL fans. The best of those sports entities were never behind a paywall, ever. But in our world, the best of the best has been behind a paywall. And the story over the past year and a half has been that those numbers, those pay-per-view numbers, while never made public, were dwindling. And so the question was, could they get enough to say, we're going to pull the plug on this for the first time in our history, dating back to 1993, we are no longer going to be involved in the pay-per-view business. We talked about this last week with the WWE ESPN deal. WWE hasn't been in the pay-per-view business for quite some time. The ESPN deal is not a pay-per-view deal. It's on their new OTT, and it's OTC, and also be, if you have ESPN, it'll also be available to you as well. You don't have to pay extra for it. UFC and the occasional boxing was the last. And UFC was the last consistent one. Every month, an extra $80 in addition to your ESPN Plus, this and that. Well, now, Ari Emanuel and Mark Shapiro said on CNBC this morning that for the basic package, which is $7.99, $8 essentially, the basic package, you get the UFC deal. Now, that's the package with ads. All right? For $12.99 without ads, you get the whole thing. No extra cost. Incredible, right? So much to dissect here. Here's the kicker. The UFC on ESPN deal equaled out to approximately $500 to $550 million a year. That was after they extended it, the 2 extra years, all that in the ballpark of 500 to 550. The numbers have been quoted differently, but that's the general gist. This one, in the ballpark of $1.1 billion a year over 7 years. Yes, the UFC to Paramount deal is for 7 years, $1.1 billion a year, equaling approximately $7.7 billion a year. $7.7 billion a year for the domestic, that's US only, rights package. Now you understand why they got rid of pay-per-view. They just doubled their yearly fee from about $500, $550 to $1.1 billion. Pretty good deal. I would take that guarantee. And so people are celebrating the fact that pay-per-view is dead. People are celebrating the fact that if you're an MMA fan, and obviously if you're an MMA fan, you're a UFC fan, you won't have to pay for pay-per-view anymore. Mark Shapiro, COO, president of TKO, said it himself. He told CNBC, pay-per-view is dead. He said it's an antiquated model. We're not in this business anymore. Now, the timing of this announcement is very interesting because in 5 days, they're going to be asking you to pay for a pay-per-view. UFC 319, a great pay-per-view. And then on October 4th, they're going to ask you to pay again for pay-per-view. And then on October 25th again. And then on November 16th again. And then on December 13th or whatever it is, again. There's still, to the best of my knowledge, that's 5 more pay-per-views. But
that's fucking illegal.
Yeah, that's right, Dana. You have to not stream. You have to buy the pay-per-views. But then in 2026, it's really freaking dead. It's really freaking dead. So there's so much to dissect here. The UFC has a new home, Paramount. No one was really talking about it. It was mentioned, and there was an article I remember last week on Awful Announcing that I think I referenced on this show. It might have been somewhere else, but they weren't one of the players. We all thought ESPN, Netflix, maybe Amazon, maybe Apple. We talked about Warner Brothers, all that stuff. Here comes Paramount taking the whole thing, not splitting it up, all 43 events, 30 fight nights, 30 PLEs, because they're not going to be called pay-per-views anymore, so they're probably going to use that same name that WWE uses, which is premium live events. The vast majority of those, if not all, on CBS. Does that mean they start at 10 p.m. Eastern now? Does the main card still start at 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS? I would be surprised. Is that good for us old folk here on the East Coast and over in Europe? I hope so. $7.7 billion over 7 years, $1.1 billion a year, no more pay-per-view. Now, interesting to note, conspicuous by its absence in the release, Contender Series was not mentioned, Ultimate Fighter was not mentioned. Those are the two big ones. They can easily sell that off to someone else. Now, if I'm Paramount, I'm saying I want to own the whole damn thing. Like, I want to be the home of UFC. So maybe they add that like they did the pay-per-views with ESPN. That remains to be seen. Or maybe UFC sells that off to someone else. Very possible. But Contender Series and Tough were not mentioned. Now, a lot of our international friends have been asking me, what does that mean for me? Well, technically it means nothing for you yet. So our friends in the UK, there's still a few years left on the TNT Sports deal. Our friends over in Canada, still a couple years left on the Rogers Sportsnet deal. But one thing that was interesting was in the release and in the subsequent interviews with Emmanuel and Shapiro, they did say that Paramount, once the deals are up globally, will want to be the home, or at least take a look at potentially being the home of the UFC in these other countries and continents. And so one thing that I did notice was that they'll have a 30-day window to have first dibs, essentially, at getting these before they either re-up with their existing partner or shop it elsewhere. So there could come a time, just like Netflix and WWE, where Netflix is essentially home of WWE everywhere in the world except for in the United States, where maybe Paramount is the home of the UFC everywhere in the world, period. That could come a time. It's a lot easier to promote things. Everything is uniform. It's all one place. It makes it a lot easier for the advertisers, for the partners, etc. And so now we know the answer to what I thought was going to be the biggest story of the year. It ends up being the biggest deal in UFC history. $1.1 billion, 7 years, Paramount Plus, CBS. Shout out to the Shaw family. Shout out to Elite XC. Shout out to Kimbo Slice. May of 2008, Newark, New Jersey, the Prudential Center, Kimbo versus James Thompson, the very first show on broadcast television here in the United States. Elite XC on CBS. And what is old is new again, because here you have MMA and the worldwide leader in MMA, UFC, coming back to the first broadcast channel to air MMA, CBS. And you have them coming back essentially to Spike TV, because Spike TV then became the Paramount Network, which is a part of this new Skydance Paramount behemoth. Isn't that crazy? To the best of our knowledge, as of right now, we know it's going to air on Paramount Plus, and we know it's going to air on CBS. They have other entities. They've got their CBS sports networks. They've got their MTVs, their VH1s, their BETs, their Nickelodeons, all that stuff and more. But those seem to be the two main points. Paramount Plus, obviously streaming worldwide, huge. NFL, they've got Champions League, etc. Also Europa League. Shout out to Nottingham Forest getting into Europa League. That's a different story for a different day. And then, of course, the big one, CBS, the I, home of the Super Bowl, home of the AFC, home of the AFC championship game, all that stuff and more. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. Gentlemen, let me tap you in here. I'm blown away by this, not because I didn't think that they would make the money, they would get the money. I always said it was going to be over $1 billion, but I'll be the first to say, didn't think that they would be totally out of the ESPN business, and didn't think that they would be in one place exclusively. Those are the two things that surprised me. And I'll be honest, I didn't think Paramount was a major leader in all of this, right? I didn't think that they would be the top dog. And so ESPN being out of the game surprises me. The price tag doesn't surprise me, but the fact that they all went to one place, that it's all going to Paramount, surprises me. Rick, you're up first. What do you think? Your immediate reaction when you heard this news this morning?
Groundbreaking, fascinating. good for MMA fans, right? If you are a fan of the UFC product, if you are a fan of MMA, you're probably now, at least stateside, obviously, you are now going to be paying significantly less than you were paying before. We had been obviously operating with the knowledge that UFC was going to land somewhere, but how the pie was split up and what permutation it took was the most fascinating part. I think we got a little bit of breadcrumbs last week on that earnings call where it was revealed, and that press release later where it was revealed that the pay-per-view business was not as successful as it was last year, and I think we could have all assumed that. So I am not shocked to now see somebody in Paramount going, we want to take this product off pay-per-view and make it a subscriber model, a subscriber acquisition-based play. It makes a lot of sense. It is for a lot of money. I imagine that ESPN was a major player and probably would have wanted to do a similar type of deal like they did with WWE, where they take it off, pay-per-view or PLE format for them and just had a subscriber cost. But massive for the MMA world, massive for US-based watchers and fans. And the UFC continues to have an incredibly successful business.
Okay, GC, before I throw it to you, let me piggyback off something there. They said, they keep kind of like being a little sort of coy with this, but they said the vast majority of the numbered shows will be on CBS, which is a very interesting thing for me because those are the premium ones that you would think that they would want to put on the platform so that people sign up for it.
Is it not a simulcast though?
Yeah, okay, but still, like if I have CBS and I don't have Paramount Plus and I say, hey, I just want the 13, I'm just going to watch it on the 13, you're going to try to get me to sign up for Paramount Plus. Hold that thought. Here's the interesting thing. We've talked about how the product has been a little bit, watered down, right? At the end of the day, they always tried for the numbered shows to stack them as much as possible, right? Like there's no world where the numbered shows are worse than your Apex or your Fight Nights. Like there's been some times where it'd be like, oh, this is a low-key banger. But like for the most part, the numbered shows are better, right?
Objectively true. Numbered shows are better.
They don't have that pressure anymore. Now that they're all under the same umbrella, there's no pressure anymore. Like this idea like, oh, you have to headline a numbered show with a title fight. You don't necessarily have to headline anything with anything at this point. And so I do wonder, ultimately, do I still think that the numbered shows are going to be the best? Absolutely. And I do think they'll put them on Plus and all that stuff. But that pressure, just like we said, once they sold the exclusive rights to Plus, the pressure to market or to make it as deep as it once went away. This is now one step further, which when you say better for the fans, I do wonder if that pressure goes away. And you see what happens when the pressure goes away, the product tends to get a little watered down. You see what I'm saying, GC?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a thought. Like, you make a great point that now they're not trying to sell these things. They've essentially already sold it for the next 7 years.
Exactly.
And for a massive price tag. That was my first thought. I know it's not a surprise that it sold for billions, but man, to see 7 years, 7.7 billion was shocking to me. But they still have to make the best fights. Like they still are going to put on pay-per-view level fights, and those are going to go on the numbered events. As far as wouldn't you want to put that behind the paywall? I would actually say, wouldn't you want these best fights, at least in the beginning, because who knows what they're going to do over the course of the 7 years, to be on CBS Linear where you can essentially get that anywhere in the country.
Biggest audience.
For free of charge. You could even do what were we talking about earlier, Jordan?
Digital antenna, digital rabbit ears, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting a pay-per-view, that would be like putting a pay-per-view on ABC. The amount of eyes that you can get on that, bars can now just play it wherever. It'll just be on a Saturday night with the biggest fights. I mean, it can really, really grow the sport. That was my other takeaway, was the fact that the pay-per-view model is going away. You said $8 entry. We're assuming that maybe they're going to raise that. Let's say they double it to $15 or $16 a month. You're still getting every single UFC event for $15 or $16 a month. You'll be able to watch it on your TV, on your phone, on your laptop, on whatever. And it's that easy to be accessible to these fights. That's the biggest thing, is the price tag and now the accessibility to every fan.
So can
I just give a devil's advocate
on
the potential pressure? The potential pressure is off to sell an individual pay-per-view, certainly. Like, as you said, right? They no longer have to worry about, hey, this headline fight now sells this many pay-per-views and we've made our money, and the Conor McGregors and the John Joneses of the world. You don't necessarily have to do that part. But you now have the pressure of, you have signed a 7-year deal with a company that is going to expect a return on investment for what they've made here. They are not in this business. They are not hoping that they are just, acquiring the UFC in order to push the profits to the next deal, because who knows, the UFC may jump ship again and ended up with the next highest bidder. There's now a pressure to get those subscribers in, and the way to get those subscribers in is going to be those big time fights, is going to be the fights that on the numbered cards get people, when they're exposed to it on CBS, to go, shit, I'm actually going to pay money to subscribe so I can see the rest of this UFC product. So I actually think there's a different type of pressure. I don't want to do the is it more, is it less? But there is a different type of pressure now that they have signed the deal and the money has been paid up front, that they need to deliver the subscribers in a way that they didn't previously. They could kind of skate by on the ESPN part of this because financially it was such a huge win.
Yeah, now the pressure is on Paramount to sell this. Like they bought it, now they have to try to sell it to people. Now, our friend Pizzi is over in Europe, in Ireland to be exact, and in Dublin to be exact, actually in Blanche to be exact. And you're sitting here listening to us going gaga over the fact that there's no pay-per-view, and you're like, fucking hell, I haven't had to pay for pay-per-view since 2016, and I wasn't streaming shit. But over there, TNT Sports, it's very rare, 1, 2 max at best behind the pay-per-view wall. Of course, those fights are happening in the middle of the night, so it would be crazy to charge people. But I want to ask you this, Pizzi. Number one, let us know from the European perspective, what is Paramount Plus over there? Do you have access to it? I believe you do. Number two, I think from the general MMA perspective, if I'm, I don't know, Islam Makhachev on this Monday morning, if I'm Ilya Taporia on this Monday, if I'm Dricus du Plessis on this Monday, or Tom Aspinall, I'm like, wait a second, what happens to my pay-per-view points, right? Do they just up your guaranteed money? Do they base it on some other kind of metric? You get this many viewers. Forget the fighters who look at this number and be like, wait, so I'm getting 0% of this, unlike NBA players who get 50%. What about the champions who were the ones who are benefiting the most from pay-per-view because of the pay-per-views? Now, pay-per-view points, now they're losing that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that you put out earlier, and that has been something I've been thinking about an awful lot since then. Paramount Plus is a thing here. I have Paramount Plus. I watch South Park on Paramount Plus. I get it through Sky, so most people have Sky. I'd say you have sports packages here, so that's just a simple add-on you can have here. So if it was a situation like you mentioned earlier where Paramount are pursuing global rights, at the end of the day, people could get this. And look, a lot of MMA fans in Europe will be having UFC Fight Pass as it is. That's, I think it's about €11, €12 a month or something to that standard. And this could take its place fairly easily. Like it would not be a complicated thing for the UFC if it was to move to Paramount Plus in this neck of the woods anyway. Honestly, ever since you've put out that tweet about the pay-per-view points, I can't stop thinking about that. I think this is tremendous for the UFC. I'm on the same kind of wavelength as Connor, thinking about how big this could make the sport. Removing the paywall allows so much more eyeballs to be on the sport. But at the end of the day, we have to think about the fighters here. It is one of the lowest percentages of revenue that any athlete get from a league already. They have now doubled their money, if the numbers are correct that you relayed to us just there earlier, from 550 million to 1.1 billion. That's a huge jump. And, of course, we're going to be thinking about the champions, but what about the entry-level guys too? Still a very, very low amount of money there. I wonder if that will impact them. But I think it's absolutely massive for the UFC. I think this is a high watermark point. I think this is the biggest the sport will ever be in terms of a deal. It's huge, and I can't wait to see how it impacts everything. Even what you were saying about the PFL and ESPN. Do they want to get behind them more because of this? And obviously, I want to see what you've been talking about too in terms of Paramount Plus trying to make this a global deal. I think that's a very interesting thing, and I'd love to see how they'd roll that out if they did pursue it.
So another thing that I was thinking about, and I think we all can weigh in on this in different ways. No hiding from the fact that several of us came from ESPN. We have friends who work at ESPN still to this day, and I feel for them because these are always scary times. Like last week, it was exciting. Like, wow, you guys are getting WWE as well, and now you're losing, 43 shows. So I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. But I've said time and again that several factors led to the explosion of the UFC over the last, 5-6 years, and I think the pandemic helped. I think that the rise in sports gambling helped. And I think that ESPN helped them tremendously. We've talked time and again about when ESPN is in business, with a sports entity from a broadcast perspective, they tend to cover them more. Just ask the NHL. They weren't in business with the NHL, they stopped covering them. They're back in business with the NHL, they're now covering them. They have insiders, they have shows, ancillary program, et cetera, et cetera. Ask the Premier League. They're in business with the Premier League, they've got stuff. They're not in business with the Premier League, highlights less, content less, insiders, analysts less, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Same with the World Cup and all that stuff. And so now, if you're the UFC, obviously you're not shying away from this. You've just doubled it. It's an incredible deal. It's transformative. It's historic for you and all that stuff. But let's be honest, being on ESPN makes you a part of the sports conversation. I had someone write to me today. It's like, does this, okay, yes, it's big from an economic standpoint and all that stuff, but does this lessen or weaken the UFC's footprint here in the United States? When you have SportsCenter covering you, when you have the analysts showing up, when you have all the other ancillary shows, when you have the ESPN ticker promoting your stuff, when it's the NBA finals and you see like DP and Islam's face on the scores table and all that, there's value to that. It makes you part of the conversation. Now, again, Paramount, CBS, they have entities. None bigger than the NFL, March Madness. But from like a news perspective, like, do people go to cbssports.com as much as ESPN.com? No. Are you going to have the same type of coverage? Is that going to mean less people are talking about you or are thinking about you? Less kids who are consuming ESPN content, social media content, all that stuff. Their Instagram pages are huge. Their YouTube pages are huge. I'm curious about all that other stuff as well, the ancillary stuff that once you get past the 1.1 billion a year, the 7.7 billion, and the no pay-per-views, like how the rest of the stuff works. Because being on ESPN makes you a part of the sports conversation here in the United States. They are no longer a part of that conversation. And now I mean, the pressure's on the PFL. The path has opened up here. Can the PFL convince ESPN to be home to number two? ESPN is home to 0 number twos. They're home to number one across every single sports entity. Can the PFL convince them, hey, stick with us here? And if they do, how much do they show them? How much love do they show them? And how much do they ignore the UFC now that they've left? Fascinating.
Honestly, when it comes to the ESPN stuff, I'll always remember when Dana White said, do you know how much it helps to have that little bottom right-hand corner on ESPN where it's promoting the fight coming up for that weekend? And now every time I would see it on ESPN, I'd be like, man, it really does get the name out there. But in terms of actual coverage on ESPN, when you talk about like their first takes, their daytime programming, their sports centers and everything like that, it was incredibly limited coverage. Like, yes, they would have DC on from time to time on First Take and everything like that.
Every pay-per-view they have them on.
Every pay-per-view they have them on, but it wasn't like around the clock. Like it was nothing compared to their NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL coverage. Like it was just a drop in the bucket in terms of ESPN sports coverage. So in terms of that, I think that they'll be all right. The social media, the presence of ESPN MMA on social media and on YouTube is pretty powerful. And now you have to imagine that not only will go away in terms of how often they were posted, the rights and everything that they had with that, but like you said, like it's hard to imagine that it's not going to be muffled a little bit because now ESPN doesn't have the rights to them. Like they don't talk about EPL that much, and that's the biggest sport on the planet. I can't imagine they're going to talk about UFC.
They're not going to talk about anything on ESPN TV anymore.
I would imagine like you're never going to hear about the UFC on ESPN.
They'll talk about it the way they talk about Jake Paul, right? If there's a big thing coming up and they have to, they'll talk about it. But they're not going to cover the day-to-day beat. I do wonder, though, if we've reached saturation already, where every sports fan who needs to know about the UFC probably knows about the UFC at this point. Are they all tuning in for it? Clearly not, right? We've seen that the pay-per-view numbers have dropped, and so I don't know how much that exposure is truly worth. I don't think that the sports fan is necessarily the UFC fan. Like, I don't know that the baseball, hockey fan is necessarily the one who's going to get converted to watch the UFC anyway. I think we've probably reached that saturation point where everybody who needs to know about this product already knows about it. I'd actually be more interested if they can convert some of these people who watch Paramount programming that aren't necessarily fans beyond that, and if they can convert some of those. But I honestly don't know how much more ESPN would have had to give them, if I'm being completely honest. I think the last 5 years have done incredible inroads and made them go further. I don't know how much more there was to squeeze out of that.
I think there's always more.
Do you think that there's sports fans out there that don't know the UFC and don't know if
it's not about knowing the UFC? It's about, oh shit, this fight's on because you saw it while it was on the ticker, or you saw First Take talking about it, or you saw it on the ESPN Instagram. Like all that stuff is just free marketing for them.
It's not converting to pay-per-view.
CBS doesn't. It may not be converting to pay-per-views, but is it converting to eyeballs? In that a lot of these people are stealing it. Let's be honest. Like piracy is at an all-time high. So they're going out of their way and they're consuming UFC content. It's just maybe they came to the realization that in 2025, 2026, it's hard to get you guys know this. College kids aren't sitting around and being like, hey, get me. It used to be like, hey, call your friends over, $10 each, get some pizza, get some beer. Now they could just go on a website. And they have to evolve with the times.
Are those people watching ESPN, or are they getting that on TikTok anyway?
No, but they're getting it on the ESPN TikTok. They're getting it on the ESPN YouTube.
I feel like the other apparatuses are better for the UFC. I feel like the organic social media stuff, the highlights, the supercuts put together by people on TikTok, unrelated, unaffiliated with outlets, is stronger. As do I think the UFC's own apparatuses are stronger. Their social media, the coverage that follows them. I think this stuff is kind of like, don't get me wrong, I think that ESPN still had some value to the UFC. I just don't think it was as significant as it was 5 years ago. I think they've kind of exhausted that.
Honestly, you also make a good point, Ariel, with the NFL. They have massive college football rights on CBS, college basketball rights on CBS. Like the news shows in the morning, whatever that's called. I know it's not Good Morning America, whatever it is. Like, will they use those to push to A, Paramount Plus, and B, the UFC as well?
Did Stephen Colbert have to get canceled for the UFC to go over Paramount? No, I'm kidding. I'm not opening that can of worms.
That's fucking illegal.
Can I ask one question, lads, as like a non-American here?
Sure.
And I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, but say, like, for example, this weekend is DDP and Chimaev, and we're all very excited for it. If we go by the pay-per-view numbers UFC are getting these days, about 300K or whatever, what would you assume that a PLE, as it will become, would get on like how many eyeballs would a C, like if this card was on CBS in the new format, how many do you think it would get?
On CBS linear?
Well, that's what you guys are saying, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it would be the both of them. Millions.
It would have to be in the millions, but the question is what, like at the very end of Bellator, remember they had a show, I think, in 23 on CBS, like it got barely over 1 million. And that was Bellator, obviously. Yeah. Anything under 1 million is a disaster, but they are banking on the multiple millions. Kimbo and James Thompson was in the off top of my dome, 5 million, 6 million. It's like still the most watched. And JDS against Kane. So they're banking on that. I am so fascinated to see, will every single numbered show be on CBS and Paramount Plus? Or will it be like, okay, we'll do 4, will the UFC at the White House be on CBS? That makes all the sense in the world, right? Will we do like 4 tentpoles? Will we move away from 13 numbered shows eventually over the course of this deal? And will it be like, I don't know, 4, or just, we won't be beholden to it. When we need to make them, we need to make them. Like, you know, boxing has never had like a set amount of pay-per-views. It's like, if they need to make it, they need to make it. And then, like, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the first things that I thought of was like, all right, if the numbered shows are going to be on the Tiffany Network, which is what it used to be called way back in the day, is the main card really going to start at 10 p.m. Eastern? There's no way, right?
I'm very excited
for that.
I'm very excited
right?
about you talking about.
Nothing starts at 10 p.m. Eastern on CBS.
No.
Other than the news.
Not sports.
What are we thinking?
Yeah.
10, 8?
I would
8 p.m. Eastern sounds good to me, man.
Could you imagine?
Maybe even 6, maybe even earlier.
6 p.m. Eastern?
God.
This might be the greatest deal in the history of sports.
It's going to come down to how much. I imagine that the UFC will have some say in this, and it will be some kind of like conversation and negotiation. It feels like a later sport than it does an earlier sport, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it move.
Cranky old men on the East Coast and Europeans ecstatic with 6 p.m. start time.
Fuck, I'm more excited about that than the pay-per-view being demolished.
Absolutely. Are you kidding
What'd you say, PT?
Do you guys think, like, Ariel, I just thought it was very interesting you saying, like, maybe, you know, they go, well, we reduce this to 4 and we do 4 blockbuster events a year. Like, the UFC have capable over the years, maybe not as much recently, of being very creative, of knowing how to stimulate the fan base. They've gotten away from that a bit as far as I'm concerned over the last few years. I think we'd all agree. Do you think they have that gear, and do you expect them to kind of get creative and maybe put a different package together for the fan base with this new deal?
I mean, look, I think everything is on the table. This young man, David Ellison, I knew of his dad. I remember when he tried to buy the Golden State Warriors back in the day, Oracle, all that stuff. But David Ellison is 42, and he's the head of all of this. Wow. So he's young. The stuff I saw an interview with him in CNBC on Friday. Like it's actually, to me, it's like it's exciting. Like this is a new time. This is a new era. Let's see what he comes up with. I think everything is on the table. I'm really curious to see how they break this all down. Also, again, like all the other, for those asking, and I know it could be like weird to some. Don't worry about your favorite UFC analyst. Don't worry about Daniel Cormier or Joe Rogan or John Anik or Paul Felder or Michael Bisping or any of those guys. They all move with the product. Like the UFC is going to take care of them. Again, the UFC produces the content, right? The UFC produces all the content. Now, could Paramount do some ancillary stuff like ESPN did? ESPN did minimal. They did, at this point, it was, the DC and Chael show, my show back in the day, my show with DC, my show with Chael. That was all the ancillary stuff, but the main broadcast, including the pre and post, was all UFC. So none of that is really going to change. It's just, okay, what else, if anything, are they going to do? What are they going to do on the .com? That's the stuff that is kind of interesting to me from like a business standpoint. But to be honest, like the product, I'm sure bells and whistles will change. They'll have a new opening package. They'll have new music, all that stuff. But like the faces will all generally be the same because they all kind of go with the UFC, just like they all went with the UFC to ESPN when they left Fox. But again, it's wild to me that they went to Paramount. It's wild to me that it all went to one place. That ESPN is no longer involved. Who would have thought back in the day that in the year 2026, WWE would be on ESPN and UFC and boxing wouldn't? Wild. Pay-per-view being dead. Now, I do want to say something about this pay-per-view being dead notion. I don't know if pay-per-view is dead, period. I'm saying as far as the UFC is concerned, in the year 2026 to the year 2033, it's dead. Do you guys think that anyone will ever be on pay-per-view again?
Yes.
There'll be your select few shows, right? Events, mega fight.
These things are all cyclical. What will happen is...
Do you think something will pop up in 2027, 2028, and they'll be like, yes?
Yes.
Like what? What is on the horizon?
Well, KSW, Octagons, all these survive off their pay-per-view money's in Europe.
No, we're
Are
talking...
you asking UFC specifically?
No, I'm talking combat sports.
Conor McGregor versus Jake Paul on pay-per-view.
You think so?
Something like that will happen.
You don't think they would put that on a Netflix?
I mean, like,
maybe it could.
Or a Paramount Plus?
But maybe the economics of that get to the point where Netflix doesn't want to pay it. These things are all timing and cyclical. For one, Netflix is shelling out a lot of money for all these properties. Maybe the time will come where when that fight, I'm making up that fight, but let's say that fight were to happen in 2 years from now, 3 years from now. When that fight happens, maybe Netflix isn't interested in that business anymore and doesn't have the money to do it. These things all are based on the timing around how it's happening. So I think a pay-per-view will happen, but this subscriber thing, like ESPN was clearly trying to get a lot of subscribers. Paramount is clearly trying to get a lot of subscribers. This is akin to when they were first all launching years ago and they had all this money to spend and they were trying to build up the subscriber base. Then there were those lean years where all of a sudden we're not getting enough subscribers and we have to focus on cutting things and profitability. It all just comes around. So yes, I think it will.
And by the way, like talk about, I don't want to say like lack of loyalty because it's all business and all that stuff, but UFC goes on the fledgling Spike. They stay on Spike till 2011. Then they go to Fox when Fox is launching FS1, right? That was the big thing. Let's go to Fox. 2012 to 2019. They go to ESPN as they're launching ESPN Plus, and then they go to Paramount in this new era, the merger with Skydance and all that stuff. They have not re-upped once, dating back to the last time they re-upped was when they signed that short deal post the first Ultimate Fighter in 2005. They signed like a 1 or 2 year deal, and then they signed another one. But since then, they have not re-upped, and they always seem to benefit from the fact that someone is launching something big. And what's the best thing to attach yourself to? It's the UFC. Why? Because the UFC crowd, the fans, the fan base, especially here in North America and in the US in particular, they'll follow, right? They're the surest thing. Without the UFC fans, ESPN Plus would have been like a nothing. Without the UFC fans, FS1 would have been a nothing. And now they're going to help, kind of relaunch this Paramount Plus. It's, man, a fascinating time. And there'll be much, much, much more to discuss. What a time to be in the combat sports business. What a time to be involved with the number one unbiased combat sports outlet on the planet.
Right.
Last week, we have WWE going to ESPN in a gigantic deal. And this week, we have the UFC going to Paramount and Paramount Plus and CBS. And of course, there are still some entities left to sell for the TKO group, namely Contender Series and Zuffa Boxing. And we did get some of the fights that will be on this first show come September 13th at Allegiant Stadium. Thanks for watching this video. Before you go, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for us. Also, give us a thumbs up, leave a nice comment. These things go a long way. And while you're here, do check out the rest of the channel. We've got live shows and full interviews, clips, and a whole lot more. We're doing big things here, and we appreciate your support very much.